yeah, we've talked about having a team identity on here before. So you hear a lot about culture from management and what makes a player be a quote unquote Canuck. What's one way you can actually determine if a player will embody those characteristics? Like, is it type of size or skill, or is it always kind of positional? Or do you mind touching? You kind of touched on that in the last question. Do you mind just kind of furthering on that?
I think what makes a Canuck, is that your question? You cut out on me there for a minute. Sort of what makes a Canuck and the
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The identity and culture that kind of surrounds the Canucks. Because
we talk about that a lot, and I think when you look at what makes a Canuck, and when we're looking at that, we actually have a question right on our RinkNet now that just basically says yes or no, and it's a great question. At the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Would this person be someone you want to see wear a Canucks jersey? And you guys have been at Queens, and I'd like to think that's a pretty good institution of higher learning. And when you look at character, and you look at leadership, and you look at those type of things, you're starting to talk a little bit about culture. And when you're talking about culture, you're talking about sort of predictable behaviors by people in the group. And we'd like to think that people like that core guys we have now, like Bo and Brock and Petey and those older guys like Alex and the group culture has been very sound. And it's probably a lot of that goes back to the Twins. And they had a bar that was so high in regard to character and physical testing and how good a shape they were in and what they did in the community. Like, I'm sure you guys realize it because you were watching it, but people don't realize outside of probably the Canucks organization how important those two guys will always be to the organization and to the identity. What two better guys to have as the poster guys and the face of your franchise than them. So I think when you look at players and we scout players, we're spending a lot more time making sure that can you put them in that room and they're really going to be what fans want to watch, what coaches want to coach these players. So character and that identity and that culture is something we take very seriously and work very hard at, and people just playing the right way. And that's, you look at St. Louis, that was a hard team to play against, and they've got an identity there. And I think our identity is getting back to where it needs to be in regard to being a hard team to play against. Some skill with guys like Petey and Brock, and some, we got some dynamic playmaking in Quinn, and Thatcher Demko's going to be a great guy to play with. Markey, like there's some pretty good pieces there where people should be very hopeful, and that has to do a lot with culture. I hope that answers your question, Landon.
Oh, that was a great answer. I love the part about the Sedins because I hope people kind of remember that Bo got to play a couple years under Henrik and Daniel. Brock got to play one, and Stetcher and Hutton from the back end. And just those years, even though it was limited, that is kind of how you can pass on from one generation to the next. And I hope people remember how crucial that was to building our team moving forward now with a whole new generation.
100%. And you can't recreate that. To have those people in the room every day and traveling and doing the stuff they were doing with those young players, you can't recreate that and have like an artificial intelligence or go to a virtual reality and put the goggles on and say, oh, I'm sitting in a room now with the Twins and Halt first ballot.
You're underestimating technology, Chris.
Am I? Okay. All right, you guys can probably pull that off. So if you do that, I want in on it. It's like
that's good.
Taking a PhD in leadership for a year when you can get to play with those guys, and we need to take advantage of that. And it's nice to see that they've left that lasting impression on the organization. And I know you guys know that, and it's good that people know that.
And I mean, they could have easily just chased cups, but it just kind of shows how much respect that they had for the organization too. That they really cared about passing the torch correctly. Just And yeah, I mean, I've always respected the Sedins, and yeah, I think that's just one of the most classy things you can possibly do.
I think it's great, and the way they finished up that last game, I'm sure you guys still have that vivid in your memory.
Oh my god! Yeah. It's too much, man.
You can't make that up.
So amazing answer, Chris. Thanks again. Before I jump into the next question, I just have 2 points. The Sedins, another Thomas Gradin masterpiece, and I think his role in sort of building the team that we had through the 2010s was sort of understated in a way. And the fact that he was able to identify them, and then Berkey was able to pull it off on draft night.
100%.
Just a great story that again, some people may not know. And also I've heard Jim Benning talk a lot about insulating that new generation with high character guys, and when Roussel and when Beagle were signed last offseason, I think a lot of Canucks fans were maybe thrown off because the mantra was definitely get younger, play with skill. But when you look at guys like Russi and Beegs, the playoff experience and the grit that they play with, I think is instrumental in bringing these guys along faster, and that's probably a big reason why we saw such a quick development, especially with Petey, and Brock is a natural, of course, and he had that Sedin experience. But I think that they'll be huge for ushering in Quinn as well, and helping Petey develop even more into the superstar that we all expect him to be at this point. So
I'd agree with that 100%, and that's what Travis and Jim and management talks about all the time, putting those guys in the right environment. I'd agree that those veteran players and those older guys, and that's one thing about the game that hasn't changed in many, many years. I remember when I worked for the Leafs many years ago, that other team,
the other one,
Pat Quinn. I was lucky enough to cross paths with Pat Quinn, who was one of the greatest leaders I've ever had a chance to meet in my life. And I remember Pat talking and joking about, he said, people always thought that Pavel Bure played all the time on a line with Gino, and he only had to play with Gino when he needed to. And that was pretty telling. So
no kidding.
So I
just
think,
to jump on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Chris. No,
I'm good. So I think keeping those guys in a good situation, those young guys, is something that the management guys up top are very mindful of, and I'd also agree that Thomas did a pretty good job in Europe finding those Swedish guys, and that's pretty nice on his part. Go ahead.
Yeah, all I wanted to kind of say was, you were saying that playing a year with the Sedins is like taking a PhD on leadership when you play with those guys. I think that's a phenomenal quote.
That was good.
Unfortunately, Petey didn't have that opportunity to take that class this year. So maybe you can talk about maybe a story you heard from Thomas Gradin, or someone who maybe had followed him, I guess, before 2017, because obviously there were rumbles that he had top 2 or top 1 first overall talent, but what were some things about his leadership, or I guess his personality, that really stood out?
Well, maybe I'll share something quick before the fact. I know that the guys in Sweden really did their homework, and a lot of our other guys saw him a lot more than most teams. I'm quite aware of that now, because although other teams would never tell you where they have the guy on their list, obviously they will express sometimes that they probably should have had more views, or they should have seen a guy a little more. So I think Thomas did a great job, and our European guys, but the guys that got over there to see him play did a great job as well. And they knew he was a solid person and a solid character, and I think you're right. Some teams probably, looking back, you've mentioned already that hindsight's 20/20, and they probably would have had him higher. But one thing I think is telling about him that I didn't realize till after we drafted him, if you look back and you rewind the tape, when we pick him on Friday, and he comes up and he's around, but on Saturday he's at the draft almost the whole day Saturday at the table. Did you guys know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, well, you do now. There's your podcast break. He came back down on Saturday and sat with us with his hat on and his jersey, and his parents were still there. And he was unbelievably interested in who we were going to pick, who these guys were, what type of players they were. I've never seen it. And a couple other teams noticed it, because how many first-round picks get drafted on Friday and go back down to the table Saturday and meet all the guys that are getting drafted on Saturday? Have you ever heard of that?
Never even heard of it. Never even heard of it.
Never.
That's awesome.
So he does that, and then Saturday after the draft's over, he comes up to the suite and he meets all the guys that get drafted on Saturday. Like, It's pretty impressive. And then on Sunday, he goes home to people. We thought he was going home. Do you know where he was on Sunday and Monday? He's in Vancouver.
Nowhere.
He's in Vancouver outside Trevor's office and Jim's office, trying to get a pass to get into the rink to work out.
Oh my Lord.
No way.
No.
That's crazy.
Incredible.
That's crazy because so we're fans of multiple sports, and for a lot of us right now, we're really glued to the NBA, and it kind of seems like that it's like he's got like this killer mentality in a sense that he's obsessed with getting better. He's obsessed with.
He's Kawhi Leonard. He's Kawhi Leonard of the Canucks.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Two favorite players right there.
So, no, you're right. He's got that ability, and that bar is so high for performance. It's really something to see, and it's special. And you guys see it, and that the hard he works, but also the respect factor was another thing that just blew, I think, everybody away. But Thomas reminded us he played 2 years with men, so he knows the respect issue. He knows, back of the plane. He knows back of the bus. He doesn't come with the big ego but he's got that. He's got that confident. I'm going to get this done, and I know what I'm doing, and you got to keep up. So, I wish I could have kept track of how many kids come to the combine, and you ask them what maybe what their dream would be or whatever. And if I hear one more guy say he wants to play on it with Elias Pettersson, I'm going to lose my mind. I always say the lineup's getting pretty long. So
Amazing. I have two very quick follow-ups before I jump into the next question, just because this is fascinating. I remember Petey's interview on After Hours pretty early in the season, and I remember it was the first chance that a lot of us got to hear him talk at length about sort of his history and where he comes from and his mentality, that sort of stuff. And a lot of people questioned how slight his frame was and whether or not that would translate to the next level. But I think it's really unquestionable at this point. Like you said, he knows the back of the bus. He knows what it's like to be the smallest guy on his team for his entire life. And if that wasn't one of the main factors in producing not only his mentality, but also his ability on the ice to play in tight spaces and to find his teammates and make those around him better, I think that has to be one of the major factors. And I don't know if you can disclose this information, but in 2017 on draft night, and stop me if I'm going too far, were you going to take Nolan Patrick or Nico Hischier had you won the lottery, or was it going to be EP all along?
As far as I know, and I don't think I'm talking out of school, as far as I know, most of the guys in that room were so locked in on Pettersson. I don't know what the lottery, I can't say the lottery would have changed it, but I do know that Pettersson was the guy. And
Unreal.
And the guys were, we had a feeling it was going to play out the way it would in the top 2-3 guys for sure. And you sit there and you think, and I know other teams, like I said, they never tell you where they had them, but I've known some guys for many years. I used to play with some of these guys, and when Petey would do something spectacular, you'd see them on the road the next day, and they're going, man, we good for you guys for stepping up, because we probably didn't have him where we should have had him. So sometimes it works out. It's like you said, it's 2020 though. I hope he wins the Calder, and I hope he goes on to be a great Canuck, because it's a wonderful story, and he's a guy that in the right environment, and I think that environment's being created for him there now. You guys are right. He could be an absolute spectacular player to lead the franchise for many years.
I have butterflies, by the way, just like hearing you talk about this, man. Like, this is crazy. Because he's given hope to a team that was a little bit hopeless in the past few years, and not alone. Obviously, there's a cavalry, there's an army there that's being built, which we really admire and respect as Canucks fans. But for you guys to have had that much confidence in him, and for him to sort of back that up with his play and especially with his character, I think is amazing.